Hey guys, Mark Allen, BHSpringSolutions LLC and BHSpringSolutions.com. This is our October 2019 service alert for the 1911 Officers Model pistols. And what we're going to show you is actually going to cover a lot of ground, but it's really the heart of the reason BHSpringSolutions went into business in the first place was this knowledge that handguns run on springs and maintenance can make a difference in terms of performance, in terms of reliability, in terms of accuracy, in terms of everything, because every moving part in a handgun is regulated and controlled by the action and the resistance of a spring, and with almost no exceptions to that. So what we have done is we've put together a presentation here to show you the importance of changing out certain springs at intervals that are going to keep your firearms functioning perfectly and well. And the subject today is the 1911 Officers Model. The 1911 Officers Model is virtually unchanged from John Browning's original 1911 design, which was a 5-inch barrel. The Officer's Model is a 3.5-inch barrel, and you can kind of see, if these are overlaid, that the difference in these two handguns really is that 1.5 inch off of the barrel that's been lopped off of the barrel of the Officer's Model pistol. Now what we're talking about today is specifically the Officer's Model Recoil Spring, and we've got some interesting things to show you. First of all, we want to show you this. This is John Browning's original design recoil spring for a 1911 5-inch barrel handgun. In other words, he designed this cartridge, the 45 ACP. I consider it to be the most devastating handgun round that you can still choose yet today. It makes a very big hole, and in wintertime months when even bad guys have got 3 or 4 or 5 layers of heavy clothing on because of deep cold weather, I tend to favor this this cartridge. John Browning designed this cartridge for a 5-inch barrel handgun. It allowed him to install a recoil spring that is what you see here. It has an original relaxed length of about 157 millimeters. I want to show you something here. Watch this. When the barrel is shortened by only 1.5 inches, here's the difference in what is the recoil spring. And this recoil spring is what it is because that's all the room there is. When we designed this specific recoil spring for the Officer's Model, we put the maximum number of coils that we could so that when they are compressed by the slide recoiling rearward, if you add any more coils or put the coils closer together and make the same length of a spring, the spring will bottom out. You won't be able to pull the slide all the way rearward. So that's why the Officer's Model spring is what it is. John Browning was working with a 5-inch barrel, and you see how much more spring he was able to use. The Officer's Model is what BHSpringSolutions, a phrase that we coined called the caliber barrel mismatch. In other words, John Browning created a barrel length and a caliber. He created the caliber, he created the handgun, he created the components for it, the springs, and what he did was he balanced everything, including the ability to have a sufficient recoil spring for the caliber and the powder charge that is the effect of the 45 ACP. And then companies decided, well, you know, we can go to 4.25 inches. There's 4, there's 3.6, there's 3.5, there's 3. And all that has really happened is they've lopped off the end of the barrel and tried to figure out a way to control the recoil. One of the common ways is the single recoil spring. Now, unfortunately, when you ask this spring to do exactly the same job as this spring, you start to get the idea that this guy is going to struggle to have a long life because there's not as much material here controlling that amount of recoil. So what we have done is we have put together a summary of what happens to the same springs. Now, we are talking about BHSpringSolutions optimized gun springs. These are the same ones that are in a high power pistol that we've tested for 8,400 rounds, and every spring in that pistol, including the recoil spring, still going strong. These springs are made same spring wire, same processes, same heat treating, and we want to see what happens with the 45 ACP, the 1911, in the different barrel lengths. So what we've done is we've put together this comparison. And I even want to try to show this on the video, because this is really gets interesting. This was necessitated because this particular Rock Island was one of our test pistols for our shorter barrel length 1911 optimized recoil springs. And I want to show you this real quickly. This particular, let's do this first. Here is a 1911 BHSpringSolutions 5-inch 45 ACP 16-pound recoil spring. That's a new one. It's only been installed in the slide rack a couple dozen times to settle the spring in. This is one that has been 4 years installed, 2,500 rounds fired, original length 157 millimeters. Current relaxed length 148 millimeters, so we've lost 9 millimeters of relaxed length. Now, why do we talk about relaxed length? Relaxed length of a spring is one indication of the spring's health and remaining usefulness. So we have current relaxed length of 148 millimeters. We've lost 9 millimeters. We've retained 94.3% of that original relaxed length. This is an interesting percentage. The summary for this recoil spring that you see here, the one that's a little shorter, the one that's shot 2,500 rounds, it's been installed and compressed for 4 years. It is judged as remains fit for service. Ejected empty shell casing distance remains acceptable. It's about 7 to 9 feet, very acceptable. And the slide still fully goes forward into battery with the expected authority. And that's what we can report about this 1911 full-size BHSpringSolutions optimized recoil spring after 4 years installed and 2,500 rounds. Now, we're going to take a look at the results with the officer spring. You see two different lengths here. There's only 5 millimeters of difference between the length of these two springs, but watch this. This gets very interesting. This spring, this shorter one, has been installed for 2 years approximately, and about 500 rounds fired. So about a fifth of the rounds that have been generated through the full-size recoil spring. Only 500 rounds through this one. It's lost 5 millimeters of actual length. It's retained 93.9% of its original relaxed length. Remember, the full size retained 94.3, the officer's 93.9. But again, half the time installed and 1/5 of the rounds fired. This recoil spring, here's what's interesting. This recoil spring you see right here is no longer fit for service, and we're going to explain why. Ejected empty shell casing distance is marginally acceptable. They're sailing into that 10-foot range at this point. And here's the problem. Recently, like a couple days ago, we had 3 instances in 20 rounds fired out of this Rock Island, which previously had never had a stoppage. We had 3 times that we failed to go all the way into battery when loading the next round. In other words, it was just barely not going all the way into battery, but it was not going into battery back forward with quite enough authority to all the way push the slide forward. And so, of course, we wanted to start finding out why. We installed a brand new recoil spring. We've fired a lot at this point, and it has never failed to go into battery again. And again, we failed to go all the way into battery 3 times in 20 rounds, and with the older recoil spring. What that is demonstrating is this recoil spring that has only lost 5 millimeters of length has lost just enough of that forward push. Forward, we call this on the front end, or the resistance on the front end. When the slide is all the way rearward, this spring is virtually all the way compressed. We call that the back end. On the front end, this spring has lost just enough so that it is not reliably every time pushing the slide all the way forward fully into battery. So you do not have the kinds of margins to work with here. We don't know at this point how long this 1911 will function completely reliably and this spring will remain fit for service. We know so far 4 years, 2,500 rounds, and everything, all indications, this spring is functioning very, very, very well. It's performing very well. We've not had any malfunctions in this R1 and that 2,500 rounds that we fired in. And on the other hand, less loss of actual dimensional length here, a little bit more on a percentage basis, but we're now experiencing malfunctions, and it's caused by basically that loss of relaxed dimensional length. The spring tends to start to compress. It's trying to get out of the way more than anything when the gun is being fired, and to lose that much in just this amount of time. So what we have done is we have decided to start selling the 1911 Officers Model springs in 5-packs with a recommendation that this spring should be changed yearly or every 500 rounds, whichever comes first. And we've done this because selling them in 5-packs like this, we can make that very, very economical to where it costs a guy $2 or $3 a year to replace that recoil spring and have optimal function. I like this little guy. I can carry it in more situations than I can the 5-inch barrel 1911. It's a very capable handgun with fresh springs. It's proven to be very, very reliable, and obviously it's nice to have a package that's this size that can deliver that kind of persuasion if I ever need to stop an attack. But it's really critical to embrace that frequent change out. Now, does that mean every spring in a 1911 Officers Model? No. Every other spring in this handgun is as John Browning designed it. They are appropriate, and they will function for many, many years with no problem. But the recoil spring, the biggie difference in the shorter barreled 1911s, that needs to be addressed on a much more frequent basis. And hopefully this demonstration will help you understand why the 1911 Officers Model recoil spring just does not have the margin for settling in and getting a little less relaxed length over time. It's just it's geometrically impossible for it to be a long life spring. So I gain personally from being able to carry a handgun that's this size instead of full size all the time. I gain from that, and the trade-off is a little bit more frequent maintenance. Hopefully this has been helpful to you in some way. Thanks for watching.